Well, brothers, welcome to the North Carolina Masonic Research Society, another broadcast. And tonight we are really blessed to have Worshipful Brother Adam Goldman with us. Adam is, well, his Masonic resume is tremendous, but he's a member of the Grand Lodge of, he's the Grand Orator for the Grand Lodge of Washington, D.C. He's also a member of Benjamin B. French Lodge number 15 in D.C., which is the premier esoteric lodge in that area. He's a member of the Scottish Rite, actually senior warden for the Scottish Rite's Mithras Lodge of Perfection, and several grand lodges and research lodges in California, Europe, Central America. He's affiliated everywhere. And he's also active in several occult bodies that focus on Western esoteric traditions. His research and his interests include Kabbalah and magic, astrology and alchemy, linguistics and comparative mythology, and a host of other topics. So if you ever want Adam to speak, Scott, just reach out to him. I'm sure he would be happy to. But Adam, we are thrilled to have you here, and without further ado, the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks, Matt, and thanks, North Carolina Masonic Research Society. On behalf of the Grand Lodge of Washington, D.C., our Grand Master Michael D. Nicholas Sr. and the Grand Lodge officers, I bring fraternal greetings. Tonight's presentation, which I'll put up in just one second, I'm writing the coattails of Joe Martinez. So he did a brilliant presentation the other day on the Osirian mythos, and it reminded me of something that I have that I needed to dust off. This is a presentation I did for Doggo's Lodge for South Pasadena for the Illumination series. This is a presentation I did for that. And it's a little bit more academic. If any of you have only in the beginning though, but if any of you have been to some of my other presentations, they're more Kabbalah or astrology, tarot, and where we could find those hidden in the lodge room. This one is going to start off kind of a little bit before where Joe went last week. So a lot of times when we look at comparative mythology and we look at the different mythologies, the different mythos, we're really just comparing one story to another. It's what we call as social scientists a qualitative analysis. But my background is in demographics and politics, and so this is utilizing a model for quantifying it. So we're going to be able to probably have a bit more of a discerning look at how close these different mythologies are to Freemasonry, and draw some conclusions, hopefully, from that. So with that, let me start sharing my screen and see if make sure you guys can all see it. All right. All right. Can I get a thumbs up, Matt? Can you see it? All right, perfect. All right, so Hiram with 1,000 Faces. This is a play on Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which is all about these Jungian archetypes and that you see in mythology. But when we're looking at the what we call the Hiramic legend, or the story that we tell each other as Freemasons and as part of everything that we do, we're going to look at that today as if it was kind of along Joseph Campbell's lines, archetypal, and as good social scientists, we'll try and disprove that. But you'll see that there's a lot that lends itself to our story being all archetypal, or archetypes, or ideas that are much older than Freemasonry. So that's where the title comes from, reinterpreting our symbols through the studies of archetypes. So Archetypes are recurrent symbols or motifs in literature, art, and mythos or mythologies. And linguistics, super simple, the study of words. And so, but that's what we're going to look at. And so lastly, I guess I'll say here, so I know not everyone is a Freemason that'll be on, and no worries, this is a open presentation. I won't go into anything that is that I've sworn and obligated myself not to. But as I always say, these the real secrets of Freemasonry, everyone can find. They're in books and they're in buildings and they're hidden in plain sight. And you can learn our secrets walking down the Champs-Elysees or Pennsylvania Avenue or walking through Vatican City. So Hiram is, there's two Hirams in the Masonic legend. There's Hiram, which was the king of Tyre, and he's the one that sent the other one, which we'll get into in 1 second. But Tyre, or two, was the Norse god of war. Also from whence we get the word Tuesday, because Monday was the moon day and Tuesday was the god two and Wednesday was Woden. And so so Tyre is interesting for that, but also for some of my colleagues here that like to study the Eleusinian mysteries. Tyre was also one of the homes of those mysteries, so that's interesting in itself. So King Hiram of Tyre sends this other guy, Hiram of Bith, that becomes kind of the foreman of building King Solomon's temple, and we call him our first Grand Master. And but he made sure that the work was complete. He arranged the different groups of laborers, which we call entered apprentices and fellow crafts, and so I think just to level set, that's all you really need to know. And the last thing I'll say before getting into this is I like during presentations to make sure that everyone walks away with something, especially if you've been a Mason for a while. I want you to leave this presentation with hopefully at least the open-mindedness that that the Hiramic legend or the legend of Hiram of Bith is borrowed from much older mythologies. And, with that, we'll get started. All right, so like I said, for discussion tonight, we'll see that we'll discuss whether Hiram of Bith is an archetype, not actually a historical / biblical figure, and if that's true, then what about his temple? So although these things are both exoteric and esoteric, I should say, so there is an actual physical, there may have been an actual Hiram of Bith, there may have been an actual Solomon's Temple, and we've been there. As a matter of fact, the Grand Master and I were just there a few months back. But that doesn't mean that there's not a far deeper meaning. So that there's an esoteric meaning associated with King Solomon's Temple, which secrets all other sorts of hidden knowledge from antiquity. And so after we look at those, then we'll find that the symbols may be much older than Freemasonry, like I already said. And so this picture here, which is the Virgin weeping, I use her in some of my other presentations because it's a good way to understand that the symbols that were given in Freemasonry are not what they appear on their face. So anyway, traditionally we're told that this is the Virgin weeping, and a sprig of acacia, our right hand denotes the resurrection of the Grand Master Hiram of Bith. This book in front of her kind of recounts all the great things that he's done, and this is time behind her unfurling the ringlets of her hair, and so on and so forth. By the end of this presentation, I get into some different parts of what this actually means, but by the end of this presentation, I think you'll be able to see at least where I build on in those other lectures. In other words, the column in front of her, we'll start to get into what that actually denotes, but although I expand on those in other presentations. All right, so to get there, so I don't want anyone to be off-put, but the one of the things I do as a social scientist is I take very smart research and I simplify it so a fourth grader or a member of Congress can understand it. And so this is So this is a very complicated model. If used to be complicated, the ELF means ethno-linguistic fractionalization. But we're just going to call it an ELF model. It doesn't really matter. You'll see it's really, really simple, and as applied here, it's going to be very simple, but it's going to allow us to really look at how much of our ritual / story was borrowed from these ancient mythologies. And so to do that, we're going to quickly look at what that model looks like, go through just a few slides of what it looks like. And then once you've wrapped your mind around this very simple model, then we're going to look at a few things out of our ritual as compared to the mythology, and draw conclusions. And where things are going to be archetypes, you'll see parentheses arch, and where I'm making a linguistic connection, you'll see elf. But don't worry about that. You'll see it as we get into it. But first, let me just give you a quick, metaphor of what it is we're talking about. So imagining King Solomon's temple. Now let's think of like another stupendous edifice from antiquity, also biblical, and we find this Tower of Babel story, and the Tower of Babel story is super interesting, and so if you want to delve deeper into it, look at these stories of Nimrod, King Nimrod, and why it was that he built this, because he essentially didn't want to drown again. So this is after Noah's flood, and he builds this giant edifice that they say you couldn't even tell how big it was. If you looked at it from afar, I think they write about it in I think it's the Book of Enoch talks about it a little bit, the Nimrod part of it, sorry, and also the Talmud talks more about the Nimrod's role in this. But anyway, in the foreground, what you see is what appear to be fellow craft masons. You can't see the entered apprentices. They're somewhere in the distance, and they're quarrying these stones. But in front of us, you see fellow crafts that are hewing these stones, making them perfect ashlars for the builder's use. We imagine somewhere in the middle of the Tower of Babel or Babel that there is, some master masons, and there's obviously a foreman, a Hiram type dude that's making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, clocking in, clocking out in time. And as we look at this story from the Bible, you find a lot of similarities to the story of King Solomon's temple. A, it's probably the most stupendous edifice of its time. B, you have masons, right? But in this case, you have operative masons coming from all around this part of the world, the Middle East, and probably the Mediterranean and elsewhere, to help build this. And they all pretty much follow, if you read the Talmud, they basically are all following the ego of Nimrod at this point. But for today's purposes, we'll just say that it's interesting in that you have a story of building a major edifice. You got a bunch of masons doing it. But if we're going to be talking about linguistics, up to this point, where these guys are all hanging out right now, up to this point, there's one language spoken on the whole of the earth, according to biblical tradition. And God becomes confounded by man's hubris, I think is how it says. Hold on, I'll turn off the ring around here. So man becomes the Lord becomes confounded by man's hubris, that, what are you guys doing? You're going to build this building so that when I send another flood or another fire, you guys are going to escape it. So what he decides to do at this point was, this is where the word confounded is. So he decides to confound everybody's language, because it wouldn't be just enough to wipe them out at this point, because at the rate Middle Eastern populations were growing, there's going to be more of them. So what he decided to do was confound man's language. So give everybody a different dialect, a different tongue to speak, and therefore nobody could understand each other. And it would be very hard for them to all get together as one and do something like they're doing right here, which they shouldn't be doing. And so if we think about in modern speak, we still use the word Babel to denote confusion, because once he confounded everyone's language, no one could understand each other. So now we still say that someone's a babbler or a babbling idiot if you can't understand them, and that comes from this Tower of Babel story. And here's Pritchard. I'll just read it because it might be easier for if everyone can't see if they're on their phone. So here's Sam Pritchard, 1730 in Masonry Dissected. He says at the building of the Tower of Babel, the art and mystery of Masonry was first introduced, and from thence handed down by Euclid, a worthy and excellent mathematician of the Egyptians, and he communicated it to Hiram, the master masons concerned in the building of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. So, so here, you have other academic Masons which are saying the same thing. And if anyone's more interested in this, look at the Royal Ark Mariner degree, the 21st Noahite degree of the Scottish Rite. And if you're a Mason and you look at those degrees, you'll see that, there's a lot to the Tower of Babel story that, fits very nicely in with Masonic ritual. But it wasn't just Pritchard. Here is the language of Genesis 11. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Let us go down there and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. And I get deeper into this in other presentations that include Kabbalah, why this singular God uses let us go down, right? Like a plural, but anyway. Yeah, anyway, super interesting. But again, remember that the whole point of this is to see if there was a proto-language, if there was a single language on Earth at one point, kind of proves, that yet another biblical story, is true. So this theologian and scholar, went to London Bible College, K.J. Dersma, and in the Journal of Creation, he wrote this Tower of Babel is affirmed by linguistics. And so this becomes the crux of what we're going to look at for these next few slides before we get into looking at the Masonic ritual and compare it to the mythologies. But Dersma says, in the conventional view of language development, it developed from a single proto-language, or what we call a golden language, and diverged into different languages as time progressed. And that's going to be very important as time progressed. So space and time are how languages change. In the biblical model, man was created with language. It should say really a single language, or that proto-language, and then supernaturally changed at Babel. So anyway, so with that, then we can just look, a few slides at what that model looks like, and then apply it. So so this is the beginning of it. This is a model called the Atlas Neradov Mira, which was developed by the Soviets during the Cold War. Don't need to get too into this, other than this is kind of the framework on which the other model that we're going to use was built. So I don't want to get into this because it's not really important, but just to understand that but just to give you a little flavor of how powerful this linguistics model was, it was developed by the Soviets to determine conflicts in Africa. So, I mean, this is a very powerful model that we're now applying to the study of Freemasonry. But super simple, this is what it looks like. It looks like a family tree, and we call these language family trees. And so you can imagine, I know you can all see my cursor. So here's like a mom, right? And she gives birth to 3 daughters. Each 3 of those daughters give birth to 4 daughters, right? And so we even call in this model, these are mother languages and daughters, mothers and daughters. So an example, this is Latin up here for an example. Latin broke up over space and time into French, into Spanish, and into Italian. Now, then French became a mother, right? And French divided itself into daughters of, the French they speak in France, that stuff they butcher in Quebec, the Quebecois, the West African stuff, right? And others, right? And so these are the daughters of this French mother. So now say like, and here's West African, right? So now West African becomes a mother, and this West African French breaks into the Cameroonian, Togo, what they're speaking in Cote d'Ivoire, and so forth. So anyway, that's just how languages break up. And so the further you get from here, the original Latin, the less, alike they are. So where the French, the Spanish, the Italian, a lot of those words are very simple, or very close, to the original Latin. By the time you get into these regional dialects that are talking on the streets of Cote d'Ivoire, you can't find any of the original Latin in it. So those are called the patois. All right. Okay, now for today's purposes, this is what it actually looks like. We're not going to get into this. I just want to show you a couple things, but this is what it looks like when you apply a bunch of languages on it. The ones we're concerned with the Bible are down here. So here's your Aramaic, your Hebrew, your Arabic, right? Your old Babylonian and Assyrian, the ancient Egyptian Coptic stuff. So you see that these are all clustered very nicely down here in the bottom left. And you see way over here, here's your Chinese, your Japanese, it's very far away and on this. And so so just looking at this, you say, man, the dudes speaking Hebrew certainly do not understand the dudes speaking Chinese, whereas, these ones speaking Phoenician, probably, the Hebrew and the Aramaic speakers probably get them. So that's all you really need to know from this. But I'll just say that if you follow this up, this leads, in theory, to that proto-language up at the top, or that golden language, or that language that was spoken at Babel. And so they start breaking up. All these languages start breaking up because of the Elohim's intervention into all these different languages. And this was the plan of the Elohim, so that nobody could understand each other. All right. So then, now applying it onto a map, so we see words like Jesus, right? So a name like Jesus. So you can see that this spelling, right, the Greek spelling and the Latin spelling are nearly identical. They just pretty much switch out the J sound, the J, for the IE. And you can see that Greece and Italy are, neighbors. So that's why they're so similar. Now, by the time you get down to Israel, which is way down, where is it? Right here, they've changed a lot of it, but you can still see that, some of the major parts of it are still there. My name, Adam, you could see, Adam, whether it's a Greek version or a Latin version or one of these Middle Eastern versions like Saddam, the way Bush Sr. used to pronounce it, they're very similar, and you could see that they have, basically the same structure with slightly different endings. Jehovah spelled this way and that way. Again, Greece and Italy are right next to each other, so of course they're going to be spelled similarly. But by the time you get down to the East Horn of Africa, they chopped the whole ending off of it, right? So just get rid of this part, and you really just are left with Jah. And for our Masons, if you think back to your fellowcraft degree, there's actually a storyline about linguistics in there that you can private message me later, and I'll tell you about. All right, and I think this might be the last slide before we actually start applying it. Yeah, this is it. So but it's important. So just understand that, Pinker is, one of these, main academics that discusses linguistics, and Steve Pinker says that a word is just an arbitrary symbol, much like an Egyptian hieroglyph, right? A connection between a signal and an idea shared by all members of a community. And you can think that when you join a community like the Masons or the Army, when I got into the Army, man, one of the first things they do is strip you of all the things that you used to say, and now everything is is foobar, they're, anyway, so they give you a whole new series of words. So it's people of a community all agreeing to a meaning of a word. And that's just the same with our meaning. So, because as it says here, the word duck, for example, doesn't look like a duck, maybe like it might in Chinese or in hieroglyph. It doesn't walk or quack like a duck, but we can use it to convey the idea of a duck because we've all formed that connection with it. And so, and you can see what Pinker has done here and how this model works. It's all about the consonants, just like, my buddies here that study Kabbalah, we use the oldest versions, when it essentially right after it was Phoenician, and there's no vowels associated in most of the Kabbalistic teachings. And so once you dump the vowels from duck, you're just left with these two consonants, D and K, which could also be deck or a dock or a dick or anything you wanted it to be. You choose the vowel that goes in the middle, and that's the same that when we look at Kabbalistic Hebrew, like our forefathers of Masonry that were Kabbalists. That's what they were using this too, so they would have known these things. And so now we're going to apply this to our friend Hiram here. And this is what it looks like when you apply it to this model. You get rid of the two vowels, and you get either the HRM, or as you saw in sometimes you just remove the ending. So let's take a deep breath, because that was the end of the academic part. Now we get to have fun with it. But hopefully that all makes sense so far. So, but just remember, right now, based on all that great academic literature, we're going to look at Hiram as H, R, and M, or H and R, and that's the way this linguistics model works. All right. So who was he? All right. So if you anyway, so first guy I like that matches the model. You can see here's Hiram, HRM. Here's Hermes Trismegistus, but Hermes HRM, right? And so these other vowels have been added in, but it's essentially the same word. And so there's going to be a lot to this, but immediately when we look at this plate of Hermes, there's so much going on here, but immediately you see that if anyone has studied much of the Hermetic, the Corpus Hermeticum, or the body of Hermetic work, or this book in particular, the Kybalion, you'll see that one of the main teachings of the Hermetic wisdom is what's called as above, so below, and you see this over and over. You see with his right hand he's pointing up to the heavens, and with his left hand he's pointing down, and he's carrying this volume of the sacred law, or maybe his Kybalion, or maybe it's the same book of the law that the high priestess has in the tarot. Although it's beyond the scope of this lecture, I mean, all these things, in the background, there's all these numbers. You see threes everywhere, lots of threes, right? You see lots of threes. You see also that these arrows, for my buddies that study tarot here, you'll see that what is an arrow, but really it's just a wand with a point on it, right? So this is associated with archetypes in Kabbalah. It's associated with the element of fire. And here is a sword also in the tarot associated with air, right? And then the cloud, which is also associated with air. I mean, all of the main elements are hidden here, but also you'll see that here is the main kind of hand gear of Hermes, which is the caduceus, and it's two serpents intertwined. Unfortunately, it was used improperly by the American Medical Association. It was supposed to be a single serpent, but it was applied by, I think, an Army officer, and it stuck. But the AMA uses the wrong symbol, by the way. And we find this, by the way, these Hermetic teachings, this as above, so below, we find this also in the Bible. We find this in the Lord's Prayer, right? Our Father who art in heaven. And so on earth, right, pointing down, as it is in heaven, right, and our daily bread and all that, it all has esoteric meanings. But you'll find that these archetypes, although we're focusing specifically on the mythology versus the Masonic ritual, you'll see that, you know, it carries over into you know, the various volumes of the sacred law. So Trismegistus, Hermes, Trismegistus means thrice great, and that's because he was the greatest king, the greatest philosopher, and the greatest priest. And you see this in the you know, more or less in the three pillars of the Masonic lodge room, right? You have King Solomon in the east, you have Hiram, king of Tyre, in the west, and Hiram of Biff, the widow's son, in the south. And so these are not dissimilar than those, especially the archetypal rules. Like, forget the fact that, you know, that two of them are kings, right? So this could be a priest king, right? Like I said, the Eleusinian mysteries came out of Tyre after they were done in Eleusis. The other thing that Hermes was known as is the father of alchemy, the father of astrology, and the father of theurgy, which means magic. And father in Hebrew is Ab, or Abba, but we'll just say Ab. The first two letters of the alphabet are Aleph Bet, is where we get the word alphabet, from Aleph Bet. And so father is Ab. And you see that Hiram Abiff, right, the beginning of his name is Ab, right? So he's the father. And so one scholar in one of his books out there, you know, found that in his research, Abi means without a father. So if you add this little suffix I, it means without a father. I haven't corroborated that, but it is interesting, because if so, then it literally means without a father, and without a father is the son of a widow or a widow's son, which is one of the monikers that we have for Hiram Abiff. So now if we start looking a little bit closer at the comparative mythology between the Kabbalions teachings and the Masonic teachings, you know, 7 principles, you know, are trivium and quadrivium combined are 7, right? So the liberal arts and sciences are also 7, and so we find that, you know, these are just really interesting. And if you haven't looked deeply into these, I highly suggest that you do so. But I think we'll use, you know, everything's kind of in the Godhead, and everything has this vibration, and I mean, everything, it makes its way into the Pythagorean teachings and so forth. But that's a heavy lift. So today we'll just at least focus on just this one, which is the most famous, the as above, so below, because we're going to see a lot of that symbolism in some of the Masonic plates. And speaking of, so here's the seal of Solomon on the left. And so here you can see he's not reflecting in the mirror because he's Narcissus, right? He's reflecting, or in the water, he's you know, above, right, and below. So as above, so below. And this is the old symbol, you know, and he's surrounded by this infinity symbol of Ouroboros. And but start understanding, which I get into in different presentations. You see on this side, he's got a white beard, which matches the white squares of the Masonic pavement, which are associated with the sun. And then you see everything kind of like yin yang is the opposites, right? And here's his beard all black, because what the you know, as the sun rules the day and the moon governs the night, right? So the moon governs the night, and so the so it's everything is black down here, because this is Solomon's solar half and his lunar half. Sol from Solomon, Sol Invictus, or the sun, right? And A is and Mon, right? Mon is short for moon, and is, you know, from whence we get Monday, the moon's day, and, you know, and the menstrual cycle is connected to the 29.5-day cycle of the moon, and so forth. Here is the classic Eliphas Levi Solve et Coagula Baphomet. And in this Baphomet symbol, you see that it's doing the same thing, right? As above, right? So below. And they always, really, try and, really come down hard on this one. But if you understand the alchemical and the Hermetic teachings in it, it's not so bad. Here is the Capricorn. Luckily, it has a upward facing pentagram, which is the symbol of man. But you see what he has. He has the Hermetic caduceus. And by the way, one of the Italian sculptors made a apotheosis of George Washington, or like a deifying of George Washington's sculpture. And I don't have it in this one, but Washington, when they unveiled it, I think in the early 1900s, he's just got this loincloth on. He's pointing above and below, and basically mimicking this Baphomet symbol, which is the Hermetic teachings. And so again, as you come into start looking at Masonic symbolism, again, the male and female, or the other way that we could say that in Hermes. So if we say it here as Sol Amon, sun and moon, the Solomon, we could also say Hermes and his kind of girlfriend consort Aphrodite, which together become the perfected human, both male, female, Hermaphrodite or hermaphrodite. And we'll start seeing this Eye of Providence later, hidden throughout. But again, as above, so below, right? As you walk into the lodge room, you have above the pillars surrounding the west gate, the sphere terrestrial and the sphere heavenly. And again, male, right? My sex magic talks, I get into this. The compasses are rudimentary phallus or lingam, and then the square is the pubic square of the female, or the yoni, and so together, it refers to the sexual act. But again, these are all archetypes, because remember, the same. My body is a temple, right? And so, and the sides of your head are your temples, right? And there's a lot more to that, but all of this is kind of hidden in the Hermetic teachings, and it's hidden in the Masonic teachings. And my buddy Tim Hogan, he in his Alchemical Keys to Masonic Ritual, he reminds us that if you take the letters that spell Hiram in Hebrew and emphasize a different set of vowels, because there aren't vowels in the Old Hebrew, it just as easily spells Hermes. So when we look at the word Hiram in the Bible, we're just making a choice to pronounce it Hiram, but it just as easily could be pronounced Hermes. But here's Pike, here's Pike through De Hoyos, and then Manly Hall agreeing. So Pike said, by this and many other proofs, we know that the symbols of Freemasonry were introduced into it by the Hermetic philosophers of England. I mean, that's powerful, right? And then Hall in 28 says, Hermes was the author of the Masonic initiatory rituals. All of our symbols are Hermetic in character. So you can see that now the quantifiable linguistics model is being supported by the comparative mythologists, right, and some great Masonic scholars. So now if we start looking in Freemasonry, where these Hermetic teachings reside, again, here's Solomon, which I already told you is the sun and moon, but it's nice to look at Solomon divided like that. I know picture's worth 1,000 words. So anyway, so take that with you today, because that's something that not everyone learns in Freemasonry, and that's not anything we're obligated to not discuss. So, but anyway, Solomon, the sun and the moon, right? The 7 principles of Hermetic teachings or Hermetic wisdom, again, align with the 7 liberal arts and sciences. The ashlar in Freemasonry, right? So we're taking this rough ashlar and we're making it perfect, right? We're taking this hammer and chisel and removing all the superfluous pieces to so that the builders, like the guys in the first plate of the Tower of Babel, so that the builder or the foreman, Hiram Abiff, can use those rocks, right? So in Freemasonry, we call that the ashlar. But just like there is operative and speculative masonry, there is operative and speculative alchemy. And the Hermetic teaching of alchemy, the speculative portion, they, while I have no doubt, they were actually trying to turn lead to gold, it's a metaphor, just like, you're taking essentially a unusable or worthless metal like lead and turning it into something amazing like gold, which is, could be used for jewelry and, royal headgear and the like. So that's the same thing. You're taking a rock that's basically unusable. It's just sitting on the side of the road, and you're fitting it for the builder's use, or you're taking, so you see that, it's very similar there. I'm not going to get into the penalties of degrees, but in this presentation, but I will say that if you are interested, there is an amazing body of research that shows you that all of the things that, we're saying can be applied to the alchemical teachings, especially penalties. So super interesting. And then finally, on this slide, the Kabbalion. If you apply the linguistics model to the Kabbalion, you wind up with Kabbalah, right? In Hebrew, we spell them exactly the same way. Q or K and B and L. It's the same spelling. So Kabbalion and Kabbalah are the same word in Hebrew. And alchemy, the last thing I'll say on that, just to remember, so alchemy is, what differentiates it from chemistry. Chemistry is just kind of this thing outside of you, where in alchemy, the changing of the metals and the alchemical processes include the prayer and of the alchemist himself. And so it's essentially it's in alignment with Kabbalah. And so we see that the word alchemy comes from, one of the ways it comes is from alchemia, which the L in alchemia, and by the way, that's the Arabic, in alchemia is the L, which is the same L as in Elohim or Allah, and the chemia is in Greek, it means blending of metals, but it also means the black earth in the Egyptian ancient Demotic language, and that's an alchemical. Black earth means that you're taking this kind of rough thing and you're purifying it. Later on, it becomes white, and but it goes through a process. It goes from black, which is the lowest form, or the black earth, right? And then it goes into red as you're heating it, and firing it, and burning off all the superfluities. And then it becomes this pure white, which is kind of the sorcerer's stone. And so when you think about it, the Scottish Rite degrees, for example, right? The lowest level 32nd degree is black, right? And then the next level up, the Knight Commander Court of Honor, is red hat. And then finally, a white hat, right? For an honorary 33rd. And it's not just that. If you think about the Roman Catholic Church, for example, you see that the lay priest wears black, right? And then the cardinals wear red, right? One step up, and finally it's the honor and glory of the papacy to wear white. So we see these alchemical processes again hidden everywhere. But who was he before? He was this Hermes guy, and this is where I'm writing Joe's coattails. So I like this other guy, Horus. If you look over here, here's the Eye of Horus, also called the Eye of Ra, which was his father, or a different version, we'll say. But here's the Eye of Horus that obviously has alignment with the Eye of Providence in Freemasonry, right? And here's the falcon-headed Horus, right? And what's he doing? He's carrying a deacon's rod, which is the same as the hermit in tarot, and I get into this in other presentations, but there's actually a lot of great symbolism where it aligns with tarot. And but he's also wearing kind of an old school apron here, so Masonic apron and a deacon's rod. So that's one of the things. But And in Kabbalah, he, kind of represents, this kind of solar plexus emanation of God, which we call Tiferet, or which is associated with the sun. And so although he's the S-O-N of Osiris, which I'll tell you about in just one second, he's also the S-U-N in that mythology as well. And in Kabbalah, the Tiferet, Sephirah, or emanation relates to the sun. So the story of Horus coming into being is quite interesting from a Masonic perspective. So his father Osiris and his half-brother Set kind of get into it, and they aren't playing well together, and Set ends up cutting Osiris into 13 pieces, and he's either thrown into the river Nile, or he's just strewn about the whole of Egypt, depending on which version you're reading. But regardless, he's cut into 13 pieces. So Isis, I think sister consort of Osiris, is in dismay. Obviously, the love of her life, her brother, her husband is dead, cut into 13 pieces. And so she goes about to find all the pieces of Osiris, see if she can bring him back just long enough to at least, have a kid with him, have a piece of him to remember him by. So she goes around the whole of Egypt, or she finds all the different pieces, and she puts them together, a mix of alchemy, again, alchemia from Black Earth, so it's an alchemical process, and also theurgy, or magic. So she puts them back together, and but unfortunately, she's missing one piece. She found all of them, but a fish ate the phallus, the penis of Osiris. So it wound it up in his stomach, or not necessarily the bladder, but it's just interesting that it goes along with the vesca piscis, which means fish bladder, which I'll show you in a moment. But anyway, so can't find the penis the penis was eaten. So she takes, one version of the story says she takes a reed from the river Nile and puts that in its place. Another one says she fashions one of gold. Regardless, when they do have sex to produce Horus, it's not a real penis. So it's what they call a non-carnal union, or an immaculate conception. So this is the first immaculate conception story. And it produces this falcon-headed child, Horus, and then we find a lot of this Trinity stuff, so here's again, so the story of Isis, right? And then there's Isis, Ra, and El is one Trinity, right? And so we see that in Israel, and the Jesuits, their symbol is IHS, which we're told means what is it? Yeshua, Hosea, basically Savior, Salvatore, I think Salvatore probably, which means Jesus Christ, Savior of the world. Also, it could mean in the esoteric teachings of the Jesuits, so there's an exoteric and esoteric always, Isis, Horus, and Set, the Trinity of ancient Egypt. So now if we start comparing the Egyptian and the Greek mythos, we see that both Hermes and Horus are associated with the sky, sun, and moon. And again, these are all, things that we see throughout Masonic ritual. Hermes and Horus are both associated with writing, and magic, and, magic and initiation. So Hermes and Thoth, right? But Thoth is just the Egyptian version of Hermes anyway. Anyway, so you see that there's a lot of synchronicity here. And now if we start looking at the Masonic stuff, so again, without a dad, when he's an immaculate conception, if he's got no dad, Horus, again, is a widow's son, right? So we're seeing like this whole widow's son symbolism just, getting used over and over and over again. We see the liberal arts and sciences are similar. We see that the Eye of Providence of Masonry and the Eye of Horus are nearly identical. The obelisks and the circumpunct, if you're not aware, the circumpunct, you can imagine, if you ever look at the Washington Monument looking top down, it looks like a point, right? And then it's between two circles that make the Vesca Piscis or Vesca Pisces. And but it's a point within a circle. And so we're getting all of this most likely from ancient Egypt. And so the worshipful master, as he sits in the east, represents the rising sun, which comes up over the horizon. Horizon literally comes from the word Horus. And you can see here is the linguistics model. If we dump those vowels, we're left with the H and the R, which is from whence came horizon. The senior warden sets in the west to close the day, right? And so Osiris's half brother that cuts him into all those pieces, his name is Set or Seth, right? So when we say that the sun sets in the west, it's talking about this kind of light versus dark, kind of archetypal war that's going on between this, night and day. And later on, Seth, becomes Satan again. So you see that if you get rid of these vowels, that is the same consonants, and it follows the linguistics model. And then again, Israel, Isis, Amun-Ra, and El or Elohim. So, but again, it's not just Hiram that's the archetype here. It's his temple. So here's an archetypal temple, which is the Pyramid of Giza. And I'll tell you, if you've ever looked into this, I think, Matt, you brought up Hancock's books, his Fingerprint of the Gods book, and also some of Robert Schoch, Dr. Schoch's research. Man, Khufu did not build this. That is graffiti that was put on later. If you look deeply into the mysteries of the pyramid and come away with it, that Khufu or Cheops built that thing, I got some beachfront property to sell you. And so but you see on the right side that Masons, right? Because don't forget this seal. I mean, and also if you look into the story of the Great Seal, right? There's a great book is the Secrets of the Dollar Bill. Read some. I think some Boson stuff gets into this too, but anyway, but don't forget the story that we say, like essentially the committee to come up with this seal. I mean, if you ever listen to how it was formed, I think it was like Jefferson on the White House lawn, in the middle of the night, some cloaked figure comes up and gives them this thing, and because nobody could figure out what it was, and he says, "This will be your great seal," and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is awesome. I'm gonna take this in," and everyone's. I mean, it's I sometimes quote a past master from California that says, "You always knew that a story was a load of what if it started off with two guys going fishing, or if it starts off with the phrase Masonic tradition informs us." So this was put by Freemason Franklin Delano Roosevelt in '33 on the back of the dollar bill. And if you put a hexagram, here's the compasses, right? And there's the square, right? And so if you put the square and compasses around the pyramid, you see that it nicely fits around the Eye of Horus, and it lands on the letters M-A-S-O-N, Mason. So, so it's almost like, they're trying to tell you this, and yeah. So if you want to know more about secrets, I did an article recently for the alchemical blog Tria Prima for the 4th of July, and I get into some of the secrets of the $100 bill. That's available under Tria Prima's website. But again, here's Hall. In his secret teachings, he says the efforts made to discover the origin of the Hiramic legend show that while the legend is comparatively modern, the way it rests today, the principles run back to antiquity, and it's based on the story of the martyred Hiram. Is based on the Egyptian rites of Osiris, and these rites of Osiris, are really syncretic with the Eleusinian mysteries and what later becomes the Druids, by the way. The priesthood of Amun-Ra, they taught others that went around and and created other types of groups like for adepts. And although I'm just showing you two, I think I forgot to write down which one. I think this is Karnak, and obviously this is right down the street in DC. But you start seeing these obelisks everywhere. Again, most recently we were in France, and And when you get to where the guillotine was and the Place de Concorde, now they have like an actual ancient Egyptian obelisk. If you ever go to Vatican City, they have an ancient obelisk right in the middle of that area. I mean, really, you walk around Rome. I mean, when I go around Rome and Italy in general, I just can't believe there's obelisks everywhere. Switzerland, I mean, all these countries are just obelisk, obelisk, obelisk. And every time you see it, they were co-opted by maybe Knights Templar. They were co-opted by, other different groups throughout society, the Rosicrucians. But certainly their origin goes back to the penis of Osiris story that we went over. But again, because we're talking about Masonry, when we talk about some of these symbols of Osiris, Osiris and Isis, right? So here's like literally the birds and the bees, right? So these are the beehive symbol and obviously the Scottish Rite symbols. I mean, what the heck is this? Are you kidding me? Like, this isn't a phallic symbol? What is it then? I mean, we'll get into that in the other ones. But also, here's the symbol. You see which way this is. It's like a limp phallus, by the way, right? 2 testicles. And so you see on the 14th degree ring of the Scottish Rite, it's just a limp phallus going the other way. It's the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet called Yud. And Yud, it represents Kabbalistically both a hand, but also the limp phallus. And also the erect phallus is symbolized by the letter Vav, and it has exactly this shape, right? And so in the mystical or esoteric name of deity, which we say Yud He Vav He, this is the first letter and the third letter of deity's say sacred name, and this is associated with fire, and this is associated with air. So and then in between you would have 2 He's, which is alchemical water, and then alchemical earth down here, if you were reading up to down. But yeah, just symbolism everywhere in Pike and others that I quote in my sex magic lectures and the occult symbols series that I just did most recently. They all will tell you that this is a sexual act being depicted. But why? I mean, there has to be a reason, right? And so, so interestingly, are aprons archetypes? Like, why do we wear Masonic aprons? Here's Brother George Washington here. Here's some, I don't know what they're doing, but these are Mormons that are wearing something very similar to an apron. And I found this online. I'm not a Mormon, so I can take this offline and put it here. But I will say, who was a Mason? Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. Right? So there might be some syncretism there as well. But so we start seeing these things, all around. And again, Horus is wearing a rudimentary apron too, much like Brother George is there. Why though? What's up with this story in the Bible here? So the story of Adam and Eve, it has an interesting verb usage that says to know, because the fruit that she's handing to Adam there in that infamous depiction is pulled from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? And anyway, but what we find in books like Numbers 31, the Israelites were told by Moses to slay the Midianites and they should kill all the males, and they could have all the females that had not yet known a man, right? Had not yet known a man. So the verb to know in theology is known to be a gentle euphemism for sex. There's others. There's feet washing. They couldn't put these things overtly, but certainly that's what the verb to know meant. And it even says, I think, if you look at the Numbers 31, it says, has not known, keep the women that have not yet known a man by laying with him, So I mean, it's even more explicit. I think when Archangel Gabriel comes to the Virgin Mary, he says, you're gonna, give birth to this, Messiah, the Son of God. And she says, how? I've not yet known a man. So we see throughout the Old and New Testament, the verb to know is conflated or used in place of sex. So now let's look at, this picture in the middle, Adam and Eve, and they are in the Garden of Eden, and they are, in front of the tree of knowledge, right? So there's that verb to know again. So you know that whatever they're doing, it has something to do with the sexual act. They have a piece of fruit. What is the fruit that is produced from sex is an orgasm. So this is a story of an orgasm right here, because if you look at, maybe the oracles of Delphi and the old priesthoods, in order to maintain their connections to deity, they stayed celibate, and they learned to channel that lunar energy of the groin, and that kept them connected. So what this is saying is they weren't supposed to do what they were doing. They were supposed to be innocent as doves or innocent as lambs, and but instead, they did what naked teens do in the woods, and so with that orgasm, they lost their connection. And by the way, you see behind Eve right here is the Kundalini energy of the serpent that was going up her spine and up Adam's spine. So these are why in the Caduceus it has two serpents intertwining, because each of them has the complementary energy to the other, Kundalini or serpent energy. Anyway, so they lose their connection to deity when they have this orgasm. And the first thing that happens is they recognize that they're naked, because they're so innocent before that, they don't know what naked means. And so they take fig leaves in their embarrassment and cover their genitalia. But for today's purposes, if it's an archetype, is it a fig leaf, or is it the first Masonic apron that they're covering their groin? And so great teacher and student of the Western esoteric tradition, Dion Fortune, in Mystical Kabbalah in 35, she says, the apron has immediate association for the initiates of Solomon the Wise. It's the characteristic garment of the initiate in the lesser mysteries and conceals the moon's center. And again, in Kabbalah, the groin is associated with an emanation of deity called Yesod, which is a code as well. But Yesod is the moon center. It's associated with the moon, just like the solar plexus, right? Sol Invictus, in your chest area is where beauty or Tiferet resides, and that's the sun. Your groin is the moon. All right, and then, but then, man, we could just keep tugging on this stream, and man, it just gets weirder and weirder the deeper you go. This is called a Herme or a Hermai, and so these were statuary that were like much like an ashlar. They're hewn into nice cubes with a head of Hermes, or it could also mean stone in Greek, at the top with an erect phallus on them. And these were placed at the crossroads. They started off in Greece, and the Romans eventually adopted it. And but as you passed them at the crossroads, I don't care if you're Greek, Roman, if you were a friend, foe, everybody stopped to anoint these idols with oil. Oil in Hebrew is shin mem nun, or shemen, which sounds a heck of a lot like semen, right? SMN. So anyway, but we're not going to go into this because we're at the end. So so that we'll keep that one for one of the other presentations, because really, I mean, you start looking at, there's a reason why Joe Campbell said a hero with 1,000 faces, and why it's a Hiram with 1,000 faces. We could be here all night looking at these things, because linguistically, we can say that, we can quantify that these words are very similar, and we can say that in a quantifiable way with the elf model. But the comparative mythology really just, it's hard to between the two, between the elf model and the archetypal comparative mythology stuff, is pretty hard to refute. So anyway, so hopefully, you'll at least leave here today maybe thinking of things slightly differently, that maybe Hiram Abiff is, archetypal and not necessarily a historical figure or only a historical figure. If you believe that, he is a biblical figure, well, maybe the writers of that book weaved in an esoteric meaning below it, which they're known to have done. But Hiram is I like to think as a hero with 1,000 faces, and you see hero even follows the same, H&R linguistics. Solomon's Temple, same thing, an archetype, and that this real secrets of Freemasonry are alchemical and Kabbalistic. And so, and then maybe I'll just end on this. So why? Yeah, I'll actually end on what I said, which was about the linguistics. But why, tell this story, if true? Why tell this story of Hermes and Horus as Hiram? Like, what's the point of that? And so, a good analogy would be, when I was little, there was a television show. What was it called? The Flintstones. And the Flintstones, had this kind of dopey, overweight father, but kind of like a hot wife. And she always wore these big, you think they were supposed to be like giant pearls, but because they were just, Flintstones era, they were just big stones around her neck. He had a dopey blonde haired buddy that was like short, that had a kid and a dinosaur and whatever. But if you've only heard the story of Hiram, like I had only heard that story, then I thought it was, man, these are some brilliant writers. I didn't know that they ripped it off from a show from the 1950s called The Honeymooners that had the same overweight, hardworking father, kind of like a wife that was way too good looking for him, dopey blonde-haired neighbor. So all the same type of archetypal guys and gals were in that show. And so, but, people get, there's new platforms and there's new technologies, and so they decide to update the story. But it's a very important story about friendship and about marriage, and so they want to keep these stories framework while overlaying something more modern. And that's what they did between the Honeymooners and the Flintstones. Later on, they updated it again, and it became the Family Guy, I think. So, but still, same. Peter is still the same dopey, big, kind of lovable dad, and he's got the, wife that's too good looking for him, and yada yada. So, so that's one, I think, way that it makes sense to look at these things, is that they update stories periodically. And for the astrologers out there, that they're probably aware of this, because we find that the Bible is chock full of it, right? So beginning with Mary, which comes from the Latin mare, which means ocean, right? And Jesus does his feeds everyone with the fishes, and he walks on water, and everything having to do with the age of Pisces. And before that, in the age of Aries, they were blowing the shofar or the lamb's horn, and then before that, it was all the Taurian stuff that Jamie Lamb talks about in his books. So it all just matches the heavens. So, all right, so let's end on this then, because if you listen to some of the other presentations, and I think I have those under my YouTube if you're interested. But this is kind of the beginning, and so the linguistics are, and I get into this, and I believe in occult symbols part 2 that's on YouTube. But this, she's weeping because she is the astrological mother Virgo, right? This is the Father Time is really associated with Saturn or Kronos. But here's Hiram. They tell you the broken column denotes the untimely death. But really, it has to do column is if you look at the letters, the linguistic letters of column, you get C, L, and M. It's the same as column, which is column, it means dove in Latin, and the long version of Venus's name is Venus Column. And so this is actually telling you a heck of a lot more. And also the dove is associated both with air because of the flapping of its wings, and also the Holy Spirit, which is feminine in Hebrew. So with that, Matt, I will turn it back to you, and whatever you want to do.
Yeah, Adam, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. We've had, quite a number of presentations that, dealt with the male phallus and the Osirian legend and other stuff, but that's probably the most phallic presentation we've had. So for those of you who are watching and you missed any part of the presentation, it's going to be posted on Pornhub a little bit later, okay? But, that was fantastic. And I was thinking about the broken column just then, and the symbolism of a column as male phallus, broken column, impotence.
Yeah, and right, and there's a lot that's in there, but more than impotence, it's more, I would say, to me, these things have layered meaning, so I shouldn't say as if, there is, 2 or 3 esoteric meanings that I happen to like, but one of the ways I like to look at it is when you come into the lodge as an initiate, right, you're coming in as, it's a birthing ritual, right? You're coming in tight with a cable tow around your waist, which is symbolic of a umbilical cord, and you're leaving the profane world, or, where, and, you're leaving your mother's womb, and there's a big clap, and you're brought to light, right? And it's like being slapped on the butt, and you're, the doctor just delivered you. And so, a lot of this birthing ceremony, what it has to do is just like the evangelical born again, mythologies, is that it is associated with the death and resurrection, not of Hiram Abiff, but of your Kundalini energy, right? That's what's happening, is that through the use of the extended compasses, you learn to keep your sexual passions within due bounds. You learn to control that lunar sexual energy, which students of the Western esoteric tradition will tell you that's, although it's not as overt in Masonry or explicit, in the Western esoteric tradition, is things that we talk about all the time. But that's what it's all about in my mind, and certainly Dion Fortune and Samael Deor, and you name it.
Great. We have a question on Facebook from Brother Garrett Berthold. He says, can you hypothesize who the builders of the Egyptian pyramids were and for what purpose they were built?
Read the Emerald Tablet of Thothi Atlantean, and that in itself probably tells you, where my mind is that likely the holdovers of Atlantis, and why they were, both for both initiations, in order to be a guidepost for humanity, that when humanity becomes too wicked, it survives these catastrophes. And again, I'll tell you that, if you look at the Noahide degree, you'll find that the 2 pillars that you come through when you're entering the West Gate, they're associated with these catastrophes that happen periodically at the end of an age like the Kali Yuga. And one of them, I think, was made of marble, and one was water resistant, the other one was fire resistant, one had the philosophies, one had the mathematics, one was found by Hermes, and one was found by Pythagoras. But a lot of the stuff, and then also, it encodes too much mathematics, just like if you've ever looked into the sonnets of Shakespeare, who didn't write the sonnets, by the way, and Bacon and others did. But if you looked at the mathematics of it, it's encoding mathematics that are, we didn't find, for thousands and thousands of years. So there's just no possible way. But so it's for initiations, most likely. Sure, it might have also been for energy. There's great research into, the power, what do they call it? there's a book called like the Giza Power Plateau or something, which is all about how the Nile would come up and smack the bottom of the Great Pyramid, and there was never a sarcophagus found in the king's chamber because it was never supposed to be there, and that it was, there's alchemical burns and there's burns from chemicals in the different chambers. It was a machine, but it was used for several different things. There wasn't a one-off, but more than likely, yes, it was sending energy around the earth, and guys like Tesla said that was happening, and the obelisks and others were catching it. Probably they're like antenna, power station and antennae, but also used for astrology and also something to last through the ages.
And you did mention something, they accredit the temple to Khufu.
Yeah.
They also, well, because of basically some graffiti they found in the very top chamber, but also they associated the Sphinx with Khufu simply because of its proximity to the pyramid. So if Khufu built the pyramid and the Sphinx is right here, he must have built that too. But we also know that the tablet that was found beneath the Sphinx, or between the paws of the Sphinx, which is now in the British Museum of Cairo, tells the story of how Khufu fell asleep under the shadow of the head of the Sphinx. And the spirit of the Sphinx came to him and told him, hey, you need to uncover me, because the Sphinx was covered up to the neck.
Was that Khufu or Napoleon?
I'm sorry?
Was that Khufu or Napoleon that fell asleep below?
I think that was Khufu. I think Napoleon is the one that supposedly shot cannons at the Sphinx, which is the reason why some people say the Sphinx has no nose. But I think it's clear that the head at least had been recarved at some point, because it's not in proportion with the rest of the Sphinx.
Yeah, super interesting why they removed all the noses, and why they removed the noses of a lot of other stuff in Mesoamerica, like Olmec and Toltec. And what are they trying to hide? Why don't they want anyone to see what these noses are? Does it show that the Africans were somewhere that our conventional history books say that they shouldn't have been able to be? But to your other point, going back to Hancock and Schock, Dr. Schock is like one of the world's leading geologists, and Harvard scholar, just like brilliant guy. And what does he find? That the area around the Sphinx, it's wasn't wind erosion, it was water erosion, which dates it way back into 13,500, which aligns it perfectly with Orion's belt, which rises right before Sirius, which is associated with Osiris, and the Sphinx looks very tetramorphic, right? So it has kind of the fixed signs of the zodiac. I know some people say that the face was probably Anubis at one point, but maybe it was a different face, or maybe they just destroyed the nose. But in tetramorphs, right, which we see in Royal Arch degrees, which are the four animals of Ezekiel's vision, you see that you have symbols of Taurus, of Leo, of the man Aquarius, and of the bird Scorpio before it was a scorpion. And so you have the body of a lion, right? I don't know the feet of off the top of my head, but you have the body of a lion and the head of a man. So there's Aquarius and Leo right there. And maybe it had more pieces to it. But I seriously believe they removed noses because I think it contravened the conventional wisdom, right? And you guys, I don't know if you ever look into Zahi Hawass, who was the head of the Antiquities Museum. I think that there's a lot of like covering up of the true histories of Egypt. You want to know true histories of Egypt? Read Edgar Casey.
Yeah, and you brought up Dr. Robert Schock, and I know he's in Boston, but I want to say he's with the University of Massachusetts. I could be wrong there, but he has done some extensive research there in Egypt. He's also done some diving and studied, underwater temples off of the coast of Japan and Mexico. Yeah, but his work, interestingly enough, with the Sphinx, like you said, he discovered, there's water erosion on the side, because wind erosion would be horizontal, but the erosion on the Sphinx is vertical. He dated that back to, like you said, the Orion, where the star Sirius would have been prominent. the Orion constellation.
Right, and the three pyramids and the one offset align perfectly with Orion's belt at 13,500 BC, if I remember correctly.
Right,
So,
which was first recognized by Robert Bauval.
I think, but yeah, Bauval was out in the desert with his. That's right. He was out with a kind of the shepherd or his tour guide out in the middle, and they were resting for the night on camels. And he was pointing up, explaining it. And he says, kind of like Orion's belt, and then that led him on his little journey. Absolutely.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. So I would highly recommend. You brought up Hancock, and Hancock seems to come up quite a bit. So
sure.
If there's anyone here who has not read Graham Hancock's work, highly recommend that. I'm not sure that I subscribe to everything that he says, but he makes some really fascinating points and backs that up with some solid research. So it's good stuff. So brothers, if anybody has any questions for Worshipful Brother Adam, please feel free to unmute yourself. Brothers on Facebook, if you have any questions, I'm happy to ask those for you. Worship Brother Tom Bridges commented on Facebook that we haven't mentioned all the help that the aliens gave them on the Sphinx and the pyramids.
Yeah, that's outside of my wheelhouse.
Yeah, we'll let Joe Martinez take that one. Ancient aliens is his thing.
You said it, not me.
So I will pass.
But I mean, I'm more apt to go into that type of stuff when looking at some of the Babylonian stuff. If we're talking about Noah's flood, and then I think it gets interesting to look at the cuneiform stuff that Zechariah Sitchin translated in Book of Enki and Enlil and Ninerzag, and studied the Anunnaki. But that's stuff that we have in the historical record in those clay tablets. So. Yeah, but I'm going to take a pass on that.
And yeah, you mentioned the Noahide degrees and of course the Noahide legend. And what is that telling us? Again, if you date back to the what Dr. Robert Schoch dated the Sphinx to 13,500, 13,800 years ago. Same thing with the Mayans, the Incas, all these cultures, Aztecs, all having these legends that go back to around that same time. And what was happening geologically at that time? We had the end of the last ice age. So we were going through a period called the Younger Dryas period, which was a period of rapid melting. And so you had a lot of changes in the atmosphere. You had torrential rains. Basically, those ice caps after the ice age were just melting away and causing a lot of water damage and water erosion around the globe. And, that's evident right there on the Sphinx as well.
Yeah, and where did the, where did the Egyptian civilization come from? I mean, we find, some, red-haired mummies, right, in the Grand Canyon, that parts they don't let you go into, and that were surrounded by hieroglyphs, and things are where they shouldn't be. I mean, if you ever look at China's done a heck of a job trying to obscure the fact that they have all these pyramids, right? And so they would pay farmers to bring the dirt all the way up these to make them look like mounds, but they weren't earthen mounds. I mean, you can see clearly from Google Earth that there's pyramids all throughout Egypt. So why are these pyramids all throughout the planet if there wasn't an earlier culture? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, it defies reason to believe that a lot of these ancients, like for example, the Mayans had a mathematical system called sexagesmal, and they were calculating numbers that there's no way an agrarian society needs numbers that are 12 digits long. I mean, what the heck are they doing? And so, but just the sheer knowledge of astrology. I mean, the African tribes knew about that Sirius was a trinary star system. They knew about Sirius A, B, and C, which, you know, shouldn't have been able to have been seen by the naked eye. We have, you know, stories of you know, astrologers that knew about the influences of Neptune and Uranus that were out there, and Pluto, which, you know, shouldn't have been known. The naked eye could only see as far as Saturn, right? So that's why those are the 7 Chaldean planets. So, yeah, I mean, the more you look at conventional history, the more it's, you know, it's easy to understand that if there, or say it's easier to swallow the hypothesis that there was an Atlantean civilization. Likely there was the Lemurians and the Hyperboreans before that, and Helena Blavatsky goes through all this in Secret Doctrine. But the but then, you know, at one point, you know, after people are wiped out periodically, either again through fire or water, which is what the Noahide legend of Freemasonry is all about in those 2 pillars, then after that happens, then the information goes underground and it crops up in societies like, you know, the Essenes, the Eleusinians, you know, that there's this hidden stream of knowledge that's preserved. And we are just kind of the tail end of that, and it's good when we all get together and actually talk about the esoteric meanings of the degrees, you know, because I think, you know, I said this in one of the Grand Master's messages. I you know, said that the you know, this pandemic has been horrible, and being on house arrest has really just been, you know, mess with people's heads. But if there was a silver lining, Masonic education, like to have, you know, these types of conversations, you know, this isn't something that you normally get a bunch of guys together that want to talk about Osiris's phallus, right? You know, that's something where I got to call Joe and have that conversation. But if but here, I mean, man, I mean, we're getting good presentations, and the Masonic education, and then you got guys, you know, you got the you know, the Angel Millars and the you know, the Jamie Lambs of the world that are happy to share their knowledge right now. It's just, I mean, this education's been you know, insane, awesome.
Brother Adam, I have a question.
Please, Brother Frank.
First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. Very informative, extremely interesting. Brother, have you any published works? And if so, where might they be found?
I have an author page, and so I mostly just do articles right now. I have a very busy day job, but this is, each one of my presentations that I've done is 2 to 3 chapters of a book. So I'm at the point where I have enough of it. I just need to try and I work on COVID among other things. So you can imagine I'm busy right now. But all I need is probably, like, you know, 3 weeks or something at my buddy's beach house, and just, you know, be left alone and just put them all together. Because I've, you know, the intention was always to write this book, you know, to reveal the you know, true identity of the Grand Master, to unveil him, to unmask him, kind of like Scooby-Doo. And yeah, so each time I've written these, it was with a purpose, a dual purpose, to do a short presentation, but all the research and the quotes and the pictures are, you know, 2 to 3 chapters. So, but for now, there's several of my articles either on my Facebook authors page, and then I think some of the Grand Lodges, and I do them depending on where it is, Scottish Rite.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else with questions for Worshipful Brother Adam?
Adam, this is Bill Petit. My question is the Pyramid at Giza. Okay, its layout and its accuracy of pointing toward the north, and the 481 feet tall and 777 feet wide indicates time, I believe it's 40,000 times that is the distance around the circumference of the Earth at the equator, and then the height is 40,000 times is the circumference of the Earth at the poles. Or at the. What are your thoughts on that?
And you know, the ratio of its height to its width is 7:11. You ever wonder why 7:11 has that name? That's a 7:11, the 7:11 ratio.
Well, I mean, I saw a very interesting presentation on this, and it was also brought out the fact that it was not built by slaves, because everything is too accurate. Like it was built with love instead of a bunch of slaves who would have thrown the thing together. And instead, it's very polished, very accurate, beautiful hieroglyphs inside. So I mean, it just brings who was the creator. You know, Khufu definitely wasn't.
Yeah, and there's certain chambers. Some of my brothers have been involved in some stuff there, and you know, they put a rover up this one chamber that goes out, you know, that nobody could climb through. Like, how do they build these things? I mean, you know, like I said before, I mean, we don't need to get into this, but look at it. It codes phi, and it codes pi, and it codes e, and then it has, you know, the speed of light in its calculations down to, you know, a single digit. I mean, there's just no way. We couldn't build it with today's technology, is all there is to it. To think that they built all these ramps that went up to it and dragged these things, and they fit so perfectly you can't fit a piece of paper between them, you know, or, you know, but you could, you know, look at some of the other, you know, places that make zero sense, Angkor Wat, and some of the places in Lebanon and Baalbek. And I mean, none of these places make any sense with the conventional theory of history right now. And that's all it is. Theories. It's a bunch of academics trying to tell you, you know, the way things happen. But, you know, I just remind everyone of, you know, some of the famous quotes that history is the lie most commonly agreed upon, and history is written by the victors. So, you know.
Well, the weight of those stones too. I mean, you know,
yeah,
we'd have a hard time placing those stones now.
We could not build that. We could not build that with that precision, with all of the technology and all of the world's money, I've heard one architect say.
In fact, the pyramids are oriented just 1/20th of a degree off of true north. I mean, that's incredible. We couldn't do that with today's GPS technology.
Well, more than that, do you know that there's some great research that says that the 20th of a degree that it's off, that number sequence of what it's off actually codes something else entirely. So that there's a lot of anything that you think is a mistake isn't. That everything is hiding something else in it. I mean, the precision is awe-inspiring.
Taking it back to the Hiramic legend, and we talked about the Osirian myth, and then even Christ, this concept of death and renewal. Even if we look at the 24th degree in the Scottish Rite, for those that are Scottish Rite Masons, I don't think I'll give too much away there, but Albert Pike in the first part of that degree goes through all the different legends from around the world, Greek, Roman, the Phrygians, all of these cultures, and they all had very, very similar stories, almost identical stories. Some, you know, the only difference between those stories, some talked about a great winter or a great cold or freezing. Others talked about weeping and mourning, meaning, you know, torrential rain, essentially. So, you know, they could be, in a way, those are metaphors describing the end of the last ice age or the Younger Dryas period. But the concept of the death and renewal, we also see that even in Mexico and South America with, you know, Viracocha, Quetzalcoatl, any of these ancient gods, we see it over and over again. The myth of, or the legend of Mithra. In Hindu mythology, you have Kama, who was the first man, who was killed by Shiva and brought back to life, but in a spiritual form. So he became known as the bodiless. and become one of their chief deities. So there's this.
Also, it has to do with like sexual desire. I think kama from is the same root of Kama Sutra, right? So kama is longing and desire, and it's also the same root of Camelot, right? So where Lancelot with his lustful lance, his phallus, right, and Guinevere with her, uterine chalice, right? These are they're archetypal stories, but if you're interested in that, in the 24th, I have a new presentation I've only done once, which is the Corpus Hermeticum and the Council of Kadosh degrees, where I actually get into that. But those are super interesting.
I am fascinated with the Corpus Hermeticum.
Sure.
So let's do this. You and I will talk later. We'll set up another date to have you back, because I don't know about anybody else on here, but for me, I'd be like a kid in a candy store listening to that presentation.
I very much appreciate it, and I thank you, Matt, and I thank the North Carolina Masonic Research Society.
Thank you. And just one last round. Any other questions before we sign off for the evening?
Yeah. Hi, brother, or worshipful brother Adam.
Worshipful.
When we're talking about the broken columns.
Yep.
The column in the Latin translation is pine. So when you talk about like the pine, you're talking about the pineal gland.
Yeah, sure.
Could you talk a little bit more about it? I have a few more things I could say, but I know you know a lot more than I do about it.
I looked into it a bit. There's again, you see it everywhere. The stories of the pineal throughout the when you say on earth as it is in heaven, yeah, it can also mean the astrology, as above so below, how the astrology affects our bodies, but also heaven is in your brain, right? And where the pineal gland rests in the cerebellum, right? And from cerebellum, we get hidden the stories of, or the cerebrum, you get the stories of Abraham, right? Before Abraham got the H in his name, it was Abram, right? And his wife, Sarah. So Sarah, Abram, the cerebrum, right? So you have stories, and that's where, the pineal gland is where you, it's a sensitive, I think they say it's the most sensitive organ in the body, and it's like an antenna that takes the ether or the light of God. And by the way, Horus, it comes from Or, right, which means light in Hebrew, Horus, and it's also where we get the word hour. But it's hidden everywhere. And so but the stories of the Bible, that say that discuss, some of these ideas of perfection, they're talking about the pineal gland. Now, where you see it in literature, you have the story of Pinocchio, right? Pinocchio, it comes from pine, and ocio is an old Spanish, I think, Castilian derivative. Ocio is a seed. So the pine seed, which has to do with, I recommend highly a book called, I think it's called Man, God Made Flesh. And it's all about the alchemy and astrology of the human body, and lots of revelations about great codes. An older book, but it's beautiful. And but anyway, but so the story of Pinocchio is right. He's he is all about taking a wooden doll and making it a lifelike body, which is like us being born again, right? We're just shells of men ourselves, but through this pine seed, or this seed that comes. What they call the christened oil. It's a seed that goes down the spine, and I think it comes when your natal moon is in its house during the month. Then, if you're not drinking and you're not smoking and you're like me, I'm fasting, then you can raise up this Christ oil in your spine. And your spine is the stairway to heaven, right? That heaven is in your brain. And heaven in Hebrew is Shemaim, and Shemaim comes from Shem, which is fire, and mind, which is water. So the fire and water, which are the electrical impulses and the waters in your brain. Now, where you see it, go into the Vatican, and when you first get in there and look to your left, there's this giant pine cone to the left, and you know, there's pine cones everywhere. It's like, what the heck's up with the pine cones, right? But the pine cone is what the pineal gland looks like. It's got little barbs on it, and it's a little antenna. And so the pine cone and the pine tree of Christmas, right? And all these different things. These are symbols of the pineal gland, and when it births this seed, this Christian seed or the Christ oil, in the middle of your brain, or in the sanctum sanctorum, the holy of holies, right? And if you look at the side view, it's the eye of Ra. If you cut the brain in half, the pineal sits inside the eye of Ra. I mean, no mistake in it. But you also see it in like the story of Santa Claus, right? So the Santa Claus is all about the oil traveling down, you know, from the Klaustrum, right? That's the Klaus, the sainted Klaustrum, right? And so he's going down the chimney, which is through your spine. And but you know, I get into that other talks where, you know, the 33 degrees of Scottish Rite and the 33 years of Christ on earth correspond to the 33 bones of the human spine, and you know, so much. I mean, there's so much to unpack there.
Okay, any other questions for Worshipful Brother Adam Goldman? All right, Adam, thank you so much tonight. It has absolutely been fascinating. I really can't wait to have you back. So thank you again for this presentation. It was, I heard an entertainer once say that when your audience comes, they're expecting this, but a good entertainer gives them this. Right. And you absolutely went beyond, above and beyond what I expected. And that was just a brilliant presentation. So I really appreciate that.
Very much appreciated. I hope everyone learned at least one thing. Like I said, I mean, if everyone takes one little thing home with them that they're going to know that they didn't know before this couple hours, if they've been in Masonry for a while and they take one thing with them today, then I'll be happy that, I brought a little bit of light. So thank you.
You definitely did. All right. Well, brothers, with that, I appreciate everybody coming tonight, and we will see you next week, where we will have Worshipful Brother Robert Johnson will be back to give the third part of his quantum series. So we've already had the first two series. If you missed those are on Refracted Light. You can check those out, but he will be back to give the third in his series. So that is going to be fascinating. Can't wait to see that. And with that, I appreciate everybody coming.